Welcome everybody. We wanted to start this session to actually kick off the 2021 SMA conference, and we wanted to welcome all of you. It's great to be kicking off this week. We've got a lot of activities planned, and so we're going to try and kick things off with an overview in this opening session. And if we go to the next slide, just on some of the progress that we've made recently in SMA. But I think what we're also going to focus on here in this opening session and also throughout the conference, more importantly, is what our goals are for what we want to focus on next. The big goals that we have for the community. We've made great progress, but we're actually really excited about what's going to come in the year ahead and beyond. And we'll highlight for you in this opening session what it is that we're going to try and accomplish. So to kick things off, I did just want to start by introducing Nick, who you can see is joining here today. And Nick, if you want to give a quick introduction, but maybe just as a little bit of background to also kick things off, we wanted to say a thank you to Rich Rubenstein, who actually just recently stepped down as the board chair after a long time on the board, generally working for the community and working as board chair for this organization for many years. And so we wanted to say a big thank you while we're not in person, still to Rich for everything that he's done. And you'll see so much progress that we've made over the last few years, over so many years when Rich was involved in leading this organization and this community on the board. And so recently we had a transition where Rich actually completed his term and handed off to Nick. And so Nick now has stepped in and taken over the role as board chair for Cure SMA and leading us, this organization and this community going forward. Nick, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Kenneth, and welcome everybody to this virtual conference. I, for one, am hoping this is the last one of these that we do virtually. I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready to get back in person. But thank you all for attending and welcome. As Kenneth said, my name is Nick Farrell. I've been involved with the organization for a long time now, really probably almost a decade with the organization, and about 3 years or so on the board, and now about 6 or 7 months as chair. And I'm also an SMA dad to my 10-year-old daughter, Blake. I am both delighted and honored to take on this role as board chair. And as Kenneth alluded to, I can't thank Rich Rubenstein enough, not only on behalf of myself personally for sort of helping me and helping us through this transition, but just for everything that he's done for the community and for the organization. So it's a shame we can't be there in person to congratulate him, but very much so thanks to Rich for all that he's done. And then finally, I just want to let you guys know, like I said, I'm both delighted and honored to take this role. Not a day goes by that I'm not aware of the fact that my family's life and the lives of many others are forever changed for the better because of the organization. And so I intend to build on that and to continue that. So we've got a lot to do, which you'll hear from Kenneth going forward, but welcome.
Thank you, Nick. So if we go to the next slide, it actually builds off something that Nick's saying there, that we are virtual once again this year. But it's very different than last year. I think that's something that stands out right now. That last year when we did the conference, we were really just shutting things down because of COVID, the pandemic. We were really starting to really kind of lock things down and go into isolation. We had to move very quickly, cancel things, figure out how to do a lot of our support programs virtually. We had to figure out how to stay safe from COVID, how to maintain being healthy from SMA, and also supporting each other while we went into this isolation for a year and a half. So that was kind of the conference last year virtual when things were shutting down. We're now at a point where, yes, we're still virtual for this conference, but now we're at the stage of things opening up. And I think it's the exciting part. It's definitely still frustrating that we have to be virtual, but things are changing right now. And it's very encouraging to think about what we're going to be able to do as we get back to some of the normal activities for the community and just how important that is as well. So we are now starting off with some small local activities in person for our community. We've done a couple of our local small one-day summits in Texas, North Carolina. There's one coming up in Pennsylvania. And we're doing these very safely. We're being careful. We have a lot of procedures, protocols in place, but the thing I'll say, I've gone to a few of these, is that it is very important for us to get back together in person as a community. These activities virtually certainly have some value, but we've been missing so much of getting in person, the energy, the optimism that comes from being face-to-face, having conversations, really being able to kind of interact with each other face-to-face and find out what's going on right now in SMA. It's important for that information, the conversations that happen, but also just how energizing, how optimistic it is when we come together as a community. So it is exciting that we're now turning the corner. We're going to get back to a lot of in-person events. We're starting a few right now, but we're expecting a very busy second half of 2021. We're going to have a lot of these local activities happening, probably about 30 events overall. And it is going to be important that we do this safely, but we do get back in person. There's a lot of things that come from these in-person local activities that are a big part of our community and the progress that we've made. Coming together as a community, as families, as individuals, bringing our researchers, industry partners, clinicians together as one community is one of the reasons that we've been successful in SMA, that we are able to come together and support each other, have that optimism, and speak with one voice as well. And so that's why we're going to get back together. I'll say as well that it's something that you don't quite realize how much you've missed until you get back together. These virtual events, I think, have shown us that there's value in doing this virtually, that we can reach more people with basic information. In some ways, it's easier for some people to participate when it's just an online activity rather than travel and getting together in person, but it doesn't replace at all that in-person interaction and what we really need to support each other as a community. So one of the things that you may have already heard that we're very excited about, again, even though we're doing this virtual conference now, is that we have plans to get back in person together as a whole community at our annual conference next year, 2022. It's happening in June. It's in Disneyland, and we're expecting that it will be a very big conference. There's a lot of things that have happened in SMA. We'll have missed these 2 years going virtual for the conference, and it's just going to be very exciting to get back in person together. And so we're expecting a very big turnout, a very big conference, a very positive experience for us all as we do get back together finally as a whole community next year. So we go to the next slide. I did want to say a thank you here to the sponsors that we have, the presenting sponsors for this conference. Biogen, Genentech, and Novartis in particular as the presenting sponsors really help us put this conference on, the virtual conference, and they also help us with so many other activities throughout the year, support programs that are very flexible for us as the pandemic has hit and we've had to change programs. So I wanted to say a special thank you to them for helping us. If we go to the next slide. We'll get into the meat of this opening session now. And again, what we're going to do is focus on 2 parts. We'll quickly go over the current state of the SMA community, the progress that we've seen over the last few years, and in particular, even the last year, while the pandemic has been going on, we've still seen a lot of progress in SMA. It hasn't slowed down at all. And so we want to highlight the progress that we made and where we are right now on a number of different fronts with treatment, support, advocacy, care. And then we'll change and we'll focus then in the second half of the webinar here today on what happens next. We've made some great progress. We've made great progress in spite of COVID, but we have a lot of work still to do, and we'll highlight our goals. Nick and I'll say from the board side with Nick, what we're working on here in the organization, what we want to accomplish, the big goals that we have going from where we are now to over the next year, the conference, and even longer term as well. So if we go to the next slide. To start off with highlighting the item that we've had for a while, looking at our drug pipeline. That has now got to the point where we have the 3 treatments approved, and we have these 3 blue bars at the top, Spinraza first, then Zolgensma, and then recently last year, again, even right in the middle of COVID, that progress of getting a 3rd treatment approved with Registry. So we have these treatment options. The other thing to highlight on this slide, though, is we still have more programs in clinical trials and earlier stages as well. We aren't done with the treatments that we need to do research on, do clinical trials on, and get approved. Fantastic progress, 3 amazing treatments that really focus on the underlying causes of SMA, but we have more to do. And there's more in the pipeline that we're already working on as well. So if we go to the next slide. What we look at is for the treatments that we have approved, the access issues, how are patients getting onto these treatments that are approved? And we've tracked this over time going all the way back to 2017, when we changed as a community from having no treatment options to having Spinraza, the first treatment approved. Since then, we now have 3 treatment options. We've gradually increased the proportion of individuals with SMA that are on a treatment. in the US. And this slide shows this, that over time we've built up. We've got to a point now, if you look right where the orange line ends, where we think we're at about 55% of all individuals in the US with SMA who are actually on a treatment. And so we've made progress. We had a goal last year to get over that 50% mark, half of everybody, and we did that. We reached probably about 55%. We want that to continue. There's more work to do here, great progress, but we're not there with everybody being able to get the access to treatments that they want. We think this is going to continue over the year ahead, and we are hoping by the end of 21, we might be somewhere between 60 and 70% of all individuals in the US on one form of treatment. So great progress, but more to do, and we'll come back later to our goals, what it is that we're focusing on to increase access as well. The next slide focuses now on the newborn screening area, and this in particular stands out as something which really didn't slow down at all because of COVID. If anything, it was actually our busiest year for making progress with newborn screening. Great results throughout while we were all on isolation dealing with COVID on how many states we were able to get up and running to actually screen for SMA at birth. And one item just to say here is to thank everybody that's been involved in this whole process. It's been a long process to work to get the federal level up and running with the RUSP decision to add SMA to newborn screening, but then individual advocates that have been involved in individual states around the country to get this state by state implemented. And so that's been about 3 years that we've been working on that. We're up to now 36 states that are approved, implemented screening, and that's about 74% right now who of births in the US that get screened for SMA right away. And we'll come to why that's so important. Again, we still have a little bit more work to do here to get this one completed, but that's some really good progress that we've made in this area of getting newborn screening up and running for SMA. And if we go to the next slide, it will show this progress over time on this slide that's on the left here. Again, going back 2017, 2018, about 3 years ago, when we were really able to start going state by state, getting each state up and running to screen all births in their state for SMA. And where we are now, again, about 75%, 3/4 of the way through. And we think this year is going to be big as well. And we're hoping by the end, we might be at 90, 95% of all births in the US getting screened for SMA. And so it's a big goal. It's one of the important things in SMA to move as quickly as possible, to change what SMA is for a diagnosis where it used to be symptomatic to now you do it at birth before symptoms, pre-symptomatically. And it's obviously the diagnosis that's important there, but the real reason for doing that is the treatments. And what we're trying to do is get the treatment started as quickly as possible and get them started if possible pre-symptomatically. So diagnosis, getting that up and running through the whole US so that we're screening all births for SMA. But the important part that's going to come next is what happens after diagnosis. After newborn screening, diagnosis for SMA, the important part is to move very quickly then to treatment options. And so the slide on the right is some early information data that we started to collect on how quickly that's happening. And overall, it's about 22 days that you can see here. It changes a little bit based on the copy number, the SMN2 backup copy number, how quickly in days here it goes from diagnosis to getting on a treatment, 11 days up to 37 when you go from 1 copy to 4 copies or more. But overall, the average, the median is 22 days. And so when you actually look at the overall process here going birth, screening, diagnosis, onto treatment, we are pretty much within a month now for the states that are up and running to go all the way through something that used to take 6 months, 2 years, even longer sometimes when you're waiting for symptoms. And waiting for symptoms obviously is what you don't want to do in SMA. So this is one of the big changes in our community that's really changed things going forward for us in a really major, drastic way. If we go to the next slide. The other area that we've been focused on over the last few years in particular, after we got the treatments approved, was what came after treatments. We're doing a lot of work still with access for the treatments that we have available, much more research to do, more treatments to come through. Care is an important part of what happens in a community, what happens in a disease after you get treatments approved. It's that balance of treatments are important, and we have a number of centers, the care center network across the US now, who are focused on delivering treatments, but they're also focused on delivering care to SMA individuals across the country. And so we took the step of building this network of hospitals across the US, and we're up to about 19 that we have right now, who are specialized care centers that know about SMA, know about the treatments, and know about what you need to do in addition to treatment with the aspects of care, of nutrition, physical therapy, issues like that. So we're building this network. It's important for delivering treatments and care, but it's also important for collecting information, data. And something that we'll talk about a little bit more is the real world evidence that we need to collect to move forward. After you get treatments approved, you still need to collect information on the treatments, but we also need to collect information on what is the right way to deliver the best care to SMA individuals. And this network that we're building is going to give us that information. Hospital sites that aren't just in their local areas delivering care, but they're all connected together, and we're actually able to see that information about what's happening, what's changing in the community going forward. And so the next slide shows how this has increased over time since we launched this network. Again, back 2018, 2019, when we kicked this off, we have 19 of these specialized care centers now across the US. And this shows the number of individuals across all of these sites who are part of this network, this data registry, who are involved in treatment, care, and giving information that's going to help us drive the standard of care and improve it going forward. So as of right now, we're up to about 533 individuals who are part of this 19 centers across the US. More work to do here on building this and getting to the point where we can actually look at this information and use that information, the real world evidence that's going to come out of this. If we go to the next slide. We will stop now, and this is the changing point where we've covered where we currently stand, the progress that we've made over the last 4 or 5 years as we got treatments, and in particular recently, even with COVID going on, the great progress and momentum that we've maintained. But what we want to focus on is what we need to do next. And as an overview, I think we wanted to tee this up by kind of showing that we've made great progress. We've talked about this for a while, that our approach to battling SMA was to try to first slow the disease down. The SMA on its own, the natural history when it's untreated is about decline. It's about losing function over time, sometimes very rapidly. That's what SMA is. That's what SMA was 4 or 5 years ago before treatment, when you couldn't do anything about it. It was a story of going downhill. What we wanted to do was move from that as a decline to first slowing the disease down. That was our first goal as we got treatments approved. Could we just slow the progression? It might still be going downhill, but if you slow progression, that in itself is an improvement over what SMA was untreated. The next step after that was, rather than just still going downhill slowly, could we stop further progression? Could we stop the disease in its tracks? And this is something which we think we've reached. We think we're at this point where we've got treatments available that are very effective. They work to slow the disease down in some cases, and especially if we get in early, they look to really kind of stop further progression and even preventing symptoms. So they're very powerful treatments that we've got that are at this point of stopping SMA in its tracks. But there's more to do. And I think what our position is we are not at a point where we can say SMA is cured yet. Slowing or stopping isn't our goal. That is not a cure. That is not what we're aiming for. We're aiming for what you see on the slide here as reversing, restoring function. It certainly is a big goal, and this is linked into newborn screening to prevent symptoms, stop the disease from showing up if we can. But where we have symptoms, where individuals have lost function already, we certainly want to stop the disease there in its tracks, but then we need to focus on reversing the symptoms, restoring function. So it's that slow to stop to reverse, and we're not yet at that point. That's our future. That's what we're really focused on through a number of different angles that we'll talk about next to get to the point where SMA is cured. And that's what we'll go over the goals in the short term. There's a lot of work in the year ahead and even longer to reach that point. Nick, is there anything that you wanted to say on this?
Yeah, I think I just kind of to reiterate a little bit of what Kenneth said, but look, I remind people all the time, including myself, SMA is not cured. I'm reminded every day by my own daughter, right? SMA is not cured, and there's more to do. This is not to take away from all of the great work and the great successes that we've had as an organization, especially the past few years, not in the least, but frankly, it's not enough, right? It's not going to be enough, as Kenneth said, until we do reverse the progression of the disease. We're getting there, right? We're getting close. We get closer every day, but we're not there yet. and frankly, we can't rest until we get there. So there is more to do, and I think all of us need to be mindful of that. And some of the slides we're going to get to here shortly are going to talk a little bit more about what that means.
So if we go to the next slide, we'll just summarize here the areas that we're going to cover in terms of our next goals, the things that we are going to focus on. Some of it is some of the basics in a way that we still have more work to do on simple access to the treatments that we have available, the care that's available now. There's more work to do there. When we're at 55% of everybody on a treatment, that's great progress, as Nick's saying, but obviously there's the reverse. We have more to do. There's 45% of individuals in the US who may not have access right now, and we want to give those options. There's work to do on the current treatments that we have. There's opportunities to change how the current treatments are delivered that can potentially give some improvements. And so again, it's some basics there, but there's opportunities to do some more work, more research trials in that area as well. We'll touch a lot here in the next few slides and some of the other presentations that you'll hear, workshops at this conference as well, on the question of combinations. Is one of the big things that we've been thinking about for a while as potentially the answer to that reverse, restore, the cure. Can we combine treatments? Not just the current ones, but new treatments that work on new targets. Can we combine those together to really start to give us that upward trajectory that we want? The other part is care. It's important to leverage what we're getting from the treatments to get the most out of them, to focus on the care aspects as well. That in itself is going to be one of the key answers to getting to a cure. Treatments and care combined together. And then ultimately we'll end here today about why we're doing all of this. It isn't about just the research, the treatments, the care, the medical side. All of that is about enabling us as a community and individuals, families to participate, have independence in daily life. And that's the exciting part of where all this is leading to. So we go to the next slide. We'll quickly highlight at a high level why we're excited about the year ahead, about bouncing back from COVID. We're actually going to aim for a record year of funding as an organization, as a community in the year ahead, as we bounce back from COVID on all the programs that we want to fund. There's so much going on in SMA, and it's in all of these areas that we still need to focus on. We need to make sure that we're funding programs in early research still, clinical trials, all the way through to care. We need to make sure that we're paying attention to support for new families, new adults that are coming into the community, all the way to advocacy that really is starting for these issues of daily life that we need to prepare for now. So if you look at the chart, this shows over time, going back to 2010, how much Cure SMA has funded into these programs over time, and it's been increasing nicely. We've grown from a $3-4 million funding community up to about 15 million in 1 year, right before COVID hit. We've taken a bit of a hit as we've not been able to do our in-person activities over the last year and a half, and you'll see that in this dip down in 2020 and 2021 that we're in now. But we want to bounce back, and bounce back even more than we were before COVID hit. There's big goals while the COVID has been going on and SMA is progressing that we need to almost kind of catch up with now. So we're hoping to fund about 16.5 million in the year ahead. After this conference that we're doing now and leading up to the conference next year in person, that's what we want to fund in all these programs going forward. So a big goal is definitely about bouncing back from COVID, getting caught up, but then really kind of again moving SMA forward. There's a lot of progress, and we need to leverage the success, the progress that Nick's been talking about as well in the field, but knowing that we're not done. We have a lot of work and a lot of programs in all these areas that we need to fund. And so even beyond that, we're going to keep growing. That's something that will happen even after we bounce back and get up to this 16.5. There's much more to do even after that, as well as we reach the ultimate goal that we're aiming for here. Nick, do you want to touch on this other area that's a key goal for us?
Yeah, I do. So look, we've touched on it, but the community is evolving, and hey, that's a great thing. I mean, that's a testament to the successes that we've had, and so it's great. What that means is, though, as an organization, we need to evolve with it, right? In fact, not only do we need to evolve with it, but we need to lead out in front of where the community is evolving to. We need to beat up an overused sports analogy. We need to skate to where the puck is going. That doesn't mean we do that by abandoning, the things that we've done to get ourselves here. Not at all. We continue to do those. Frankly, we just have to do more. And to be successful and to meet all of our goals, we have to, right? There just is there's no choice. And look, I see these numbers here as you all do, and I'm not sure I would have ever dreamed of numbers like this for this organization even a few years ago. But here we are, and we have these opportunities, and we have, in my opinion, we have the obligation to reach these goals, and it's going to take these kind of dollars and this kind of funding to get there. So the board has challenged Kenneth and the staff. The board has challenged itself to make sure that we can hit these numbers in order to achieve all of our goals, and I have every confidence that we will.
One of the things that we're also focused on is a core value that we've had as a community for a while, which is we're here to help everybody in the community, everybody that's impacted by SMA. And so this comes into an issue that a lot of people are obviously focused on outside of SMA, diversity and inclusion. We're trying to make sure that we are serving, providing services, support, representing everybody that's impacted by SMA. And so this is something that we're paying attention to, is this issue of diversity and inclusion, and especially the inclusion part, making sure that we are bringing in everybody that's impacted by SMA into our community, providing services, support, representing every single voice that's here in the community. And so we're doing this across the organization, staff, board, Nick as well is paying attention to that, and then the community as a whole, both the support that we give, treatments and care, making sure that we are providing all of those services and support to everybody that's impacted.
Yeah, this initiative frankly starts with the board. I mean, the board and the staff, but the board needs to be representing and representative of our community. And frankly, there are some underrepresented populations within the community, and we've got to get them more engaged to be successful. It is critical to our success that we engage the community and the entire population. So we've got this as a key priority item for both the board and the staff going forward. And frankly, we'll look to the community to probably help us achieve some of these objectives. So more to come on this, but again, it's critical to our success.
So if we go to the next slide, we'll focus now on that first topic that I was talking about with our key goals in the area of access. Basic access to the treatments, but also care that we have available, the options that we have available to us now. Some of this is very basic general awareness. We're not done with even an area like that. And so we need to make sure, and here in particular, being focused on adults that are impacted by SMA. There's a lot of individuals who are older, impacted by SMA, who aren't actually even connected in to the community. They aren't actually even linked into the healthcare system. And so we need to focus on that as a general awareness item of SMA and where we are with individuals, but also with healthcare professionals to pay attention to this particular group. It's something interesting in SMA that actually over half, more than half of everybody that's impacted by SMA is over 18. And we're actually missing and not providing services, support, giving treatment options, or having these individuals engaged in the healthcare system. There's a big group, and we think it's probably somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 in the US who are not engaged, who need these services, support, and options. And so that's a big item. It's a barrier to access that we need to focus on. We do need to complete newborn screening. We look at that as kind of a key access item. It's very important to get the whole process, diagnosis, onto treatment going as quickly as possible. We made great progress, and we really think we're on track that by the end of 2021, we'll be at that 95% range across the US. 95% of all births in the US getting screened at birth for SMA, and then that follow-up process as quickly as possible for pre-symptomatic treatment and care. There's more work to do on the healthcare and insurer system as well. We've made good progress with treatment sites, the care center network. We've done a lot of advocacy work with the insurers that are out there, the payers, getting them educated on SMA and the treatments that are available. And overall, we think we've got good policies that are in place, but there's still some barriers. So we have an overall goal in this area that when we have a treatment approved with an FDA label, we don't want to have any barriers to a personal choice of getting on a treatment. And so we're working to make sure that the treatments are available, barriers aren't put in place. And one of the areas here is with payers, insurers, to make sure that those policies match the FDA label for these treatments that we have available. There's more advocacy work that has to happen. It isn't a one and done. Insurers look over time at reauthorizations and are the drugs, the treatments doing what they were supposed to do. It's also more information that needs to come through, additional data from clinical trials. But this is also where the care center network and what we're talking about as real world evidence will come in over time. Again, it isn't a one and done. You get a treatment approved, you get a policy in place, and that's it, you forget about it. Over time, we're going to have to provide additional information that the treatments are providing the value, the benefit that we hope they will, give actual evidence for that to the healthcare providers, hospitals, and payers as well. The other part to all this is not just the clinical data that comes in, it's something that we've collected and made sure is front and center for this community in the past, and we need it going forward, which is the patient voice. And we collect a lot of information, a lot of surveys, focus groups, advocacy work, where making sure that the SMA voice is clear, saying, again, as Nick's saying as well, great progress, but what our needs still are. And it's very powerful that that comes not just from clinical trial, clinical real world evidence, but directly from all of you as individuals as the patient voice. We need that to show what the unmet needs are, what it is that we need to focus on with research, trials, care, but also some of these advocacy issues around daily life as well. And so I did want to say here that it's definitely still very important for us that we collect this information, these insights that we can provide to outside groups through the annual community survey that we do every year. So please participate in that. It's one of the key reasons that we've been successful as a community, getting the treatments, getting the improvements in care that we've had so far. We need to keep it going. So we go to the next slide. There's work to do with the current treatments that we have available. Very powerful treatments that focus on the underlying causes of SMA. They're what's called disease-modifying treatments, but there's still more work to do on those as well. That there's clinical trials that are being done. There's also real-world evidence that will give us this information about, can you change how the current treatments are dosed, higher doses, how they're delivered, and all of this kind of works around, can you get additional improvements from the current treatments if they're delivered at different times, different doses, to different places in the body? And there's some good ideas thought that this will give us some improvement. So there's experiments that are going on, clinical trials that are going on, and collection of that information and real world evidence that will tell us that. And that's important information. If there are improvements that we can get from each of these individual treatments that we have right now, we should do everything we can to find those out and get the information for us to make those choices. And again, also for the healthcare providers and payers as well. If we go to the next slide. We'll focus a little bit, there's quite a few slides here that talk about combinations. And there's two ways that we've been looking at this. I think the community knows this as well, but we really wanted to kind of highlight this in some detail here. And I would say as well that Jill Jarecki, our Chief Scientific Officer, Mary Schroth, Chief Medical Officer, in their presentations that they're giving, Jill will really kind of focus here to provide a lot more detail on this. Why we think this is important, the benefits that we think it could give, but also how we want to go about it in a structured way. And really, you can look at combinations as being combinations of the current treatments that we have available, or combinations of one of the current treatments that we have available with something that works differently. So with the current treatments that we have, they all work in similar ways. They target SMA sometimes through the missing SMN1 gene, the backup SMN2 genes, but they all work together on trying to boost SMN protein through the genetics. And so what they're called SMN-dependent approaches. They all converge on just trying to boost that amount of protein. They work in different ways, though, on different genes, the different ways that they're upregulating the SMN2 backup gene. And so there is a question on, if they work in slightly different ways, if you combine them together, will you get a boost? If they're working in different places in the body at different times, will you actually get more protein in the places that you might need it when you combine them together, just rather than one on its own? And so there's some good work being done, some clinical trials as well to try to figure that out. So it's an idea, but it's got to be tested. We've got to make sure that it is safe to do that as well. That, there's two kind of key questions. Does it work? Does it give you an improvement to boost the protein that you didn't have just by taking one of the current treatments alone? but also is it safe? There's a question of, you might go too high with the protein. If you load up too many of these treatments that work in similar ways, is there a downside to having too much SMN protein? And that's a question we've got to watch. And also, whenever you combine treatments, you've got to watch that they don't interact together in a negative, unexpected way, and you have side effects. So we need to figure that out. I think the bigger area that we really are focused on is how, though, do we combine a treatment that focuses on SMN protein, an SMN-dependent approach that works on the genetics of the causes of the disease, whether it's SMN1 or SMN2, with a treatment that works in a very different way. And this is a title that's given SMN independent. It's not really focused on the genetics of SMA, the causes. It's not focused on the SMN protein directly. It's focused in some ways on other areas of the body that are impacted by SMA downstream, the effects that you see over time, the symptoms that build up, what you actually see as SMA. The causes of SMA are inside the genetics and the motor neurons. What you see as SMA is the muscle weakness. And so one of the big ideas is combine two different drugs, you may well get a bigger impact in doing it that way rather than combining drugs that work in similar ways. So if we go to the next slide, and I will say again, I'll go quickly through these next slides. You get a lot more information here from Jill directly on the approaches that we're trying. And this again is on this first slide, the SMN dependent, the approaches that focus on the genetics to try to boost the level of SMN protein. And we have the gene therapy, which is the replacement of the SMN1 gene with Zolgensma. We have a number of approaches which focus on the backup gene SMN2. There's a number of different ways you can do that. Similar ways, but they do target differently. But we have Spinraza and Evrysdi, which focus on the backup gene. And there's other treatments that are in earlier stages that look at other ways to boost that SMN protein as well. The current ones focus on what's called splicing. There's other ways to promote how that backup gene works, and Jill will touch more on that. A treatment approach that would fall into this category as well, while not about the genetics, it's an approach which still does focus on the SMN protein though. If you're producing more protein through the treatments that we have, can you stabilize that protein so it lasts longer in the body? But all of these are about SMN dependent approaches. So if we go to the next slide, it'll hopefully describe a little bit more about the different way to attack SMA, not through the genetics, not through the SMN protein. And so I think the way that I look at this, and you know, from hopefully not too much of a scientific angle, Jill will get into that, but is what happens after the genetics and the motor neurons when you're looking at SMA? What happens downstream? So you're going from the brain is working through the motor neurons. You've got to make sure that those motor neurons are staying healthy. The genes in there are what control that, the SMN genes. But then those nerves hit the muscles. And this is the downstream part, that those motor neurons connect to the muscles through what's called here the neuromuscular junction, NMJ. And then they go into the muscles to activate the function that you see. And that's the symptom, that's the muscle weakness that you see with SMA. So this part is all about those downstream later stages that are impacted by SMA. They're not caused by the genetics, so we're not going in to try to fix the genes or the genetics that's going wrong in the muscles. But can you produce treatments that will hopefully not just stop here, but help reverse the symptoms that you see? So some approaches here are the nerve cells. If you've gone in and you've corrected the genetics, can you protect that nerve? So you might have kind of weak nerves, sick nerves. Can you do more to just protect that nerve in ways outside of SMN protein so that it lives longer, that it has a chance to have the function that you want into the muscles? The neural transmission is this item of where that motor neuron connects to the muscle. That junction in between nerve to muscle is one of the key areas where there's opportunities to step in and boost and try to protect, increase the muscle strength if you can have drugs and treatments that focus on that connection from nerve to muscle. Also, are there ways to regenerate things that have been lost? Here, the tissues that we're talking about, the nerve cells, but also the muscle in particular. When you've lost that, are there ways to restore, regenerate those tissues? Nerve cells, I think, as we all know, are very difficult. It's one of the reasons why you've got to try and get in and stop the nerve loss as quickly as possible in SMA through newborn screening. But muscle is, in some ways, I think, an easier area to look at regenerating. And there's some efforts that are really focused on that area as kind of the key one to combine together, the genetic nerve treatments with muscle treatments that are going to work together and help us on this pathway to kind of looking at restoring function strength. And we have some treatments that are in clinical trials, cytokinetics, and then Scholar Rock, which are moving forward, that are muscle treatments, muscle focused. They're not about SMA, the genetics or the nerve cells. And critically, they're being studied in combination with those treatments that we have approved right now. So that's an exciting area that we're looking at moving forward. So if we go to the next slide. After we have the treatments available, after the treatments, but also in combination with them, this is the area where we're saying to get the most out of these treatments, the ones that we have now and the combinations that we'll get over time, you have to pay attention to the aspects of care as well. This is really about, in some ways, kind of helping that bounce back, the restoration of strength and function. You've got to look at things, in particular, physical therapy. It's a key area that's standing out that we all get as important. But other items in nutrition, OT, pulmonary function, taking care of those once you've stopped what's going wrong with the genetics and the nerve cells is what's going to help us bounce back. And this is an area where it's really not about clinical trials. The information that comes out of clinical trials that's about treatments. This is where we're going to need this real world evidence that's going to come from, in particular, our clinical care network, those 19 sites that are around the country, the people that are participating in those sites and providing the information on what works. We don't just want to guess here on what aspects of care are important. We need to know, we need to figure it out and provide that information to all of you in the community and healthcare professionals as well. What's the right way to go about care, that it does work, that it gives us the leverage, the boost that we want on top of the treatments. And I think the key part here as well is, if you look at where we are right now with the current treatments, we're saying the treatments work well. They're taking us to a milder form of SMA for a lot of individuals, but SMA is not done. And we still have to pay attention to the other parts of the body that is still going to be impacted, hopefully in a milder way, by SMA. You've got to pay attention to those through care. So we're looking to build this area that we think we've made good progress with the 19 sites, over 500 individuals that are part of that network already. But we don't really have enough information yet to be able to make these important decisions. We want to build this network to about 50 to 60 centers across the US. We want to make sure that they're pediatric and adult centers, that, as we were saying on the diversity and inclusion issue, we're providing services support, we're including, and we're being representative of everybody that's impacted by SMA. So we need to build this over time, get that information in, and also over time, provide the delivery of treatment, services, care to as many people as we possibly can across the US. Nick, is there something you want to bring into this slide as well?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, you know, we're fortunate as a community to be able to say and to be able to recognize that we're evolving, and that the organization needs to evolve with it and frankly lead out in front of it. And I think this is maybe the best or most critical example of that, right? This is sort of the next phase for us. This is us evolving with the community. Our community is searching for more care, for more direct contact, for more options, and we have a duty, and frankly, we have the privilege and the great fortune of being able to provide those things. And there's a lot of lives out there we can touch, and we can really meaningfully improve as we evolve with the community. And this, I think, is probably one of those, maybe the best example or the most critical example of that. So this is a key focus of ours going forward, both at the board level and at the staff level.
So we go to the next slide. I wanted to mention and say a thank you and bring in how important it is that the partners that we talk about, and we're thanking them as sponsors for this conference, are also partners in our community in a much broader way, helping us through COVID, supporting events like this virtual conference and the other local activities that we have going forward. But they're also partners in various collaborations that we have that are focused on clinical trials, clinical research that we still have to do, partnering and collaborating together, and moving into this new area of collecting the real world evidence after treatments are approved, after clinical trials. That's going to be important for us to lead in building a standard of care and improving that over time. So we have partners that are involved here, and they're great partners in these collaborations and industry collaboration, real world evidence, Biogen, Novartis Gene Therapies, Genentech, Roche, and Scholar Rock as well, in all these areas where we come together as a community with these industry partners to move things forward. And I think this is just an item to highlight as well, that this is, again, one of the reasons why we have been successful in SMA. We've done great, fantastic research in figuring out what the disease is, gone about developing treatments, targets, doing clinical trials, advocacy work to move us to where we are now in a very different area than we were 5 years ago. But it's come from working as one community in a cohesive way, speaking with one voice. But it's also been this important angle of, we're not just individuals that are impacted by SMA, we need to bring in other groups into our community as well. That's the answer when you're a rarer orphan disease, bringing in partners that can help us in various different ways, whether it's the early researchers, these industry groups that have come in, advocacy partners across the country, and then also healthcare professionals as well. It's one of the key things, and again, why we're very excited to get back in person, especially at next year's conference, that time where we will, as a whole community, individuals, families, and these other groups, industry, clinicians, and researchers as well, come together as one. And that's, as much as the great research and clinical trials, treatments, that has been one of the key things of why we've seen the success and progress that we have in SMA. So we go to the next slide. We'll touch here on what I was mentioning at the start as the ultimate goal of why we're doing all this work. That what I was just touching on there, you know, a lot of what we've seen as progress in research, treatments, as care has come from this community, the way that it's worked together to support each other, bring in everybody that's impacted by SMA and these other groups as well. That's what really kind of triggered the progress that we were able to then start to make with early research, figuring out the causes of the disease, leading to specific targeted disease modifying treatments, multiple treatment options, and now how all that blends together with care going forward. This is not just a pathway though where you do one thing and you cross it off the list. Then, you know, we've done research, we can cross that off the list and move to treatments, we cross that off and move to care. It isn't at that point. We still have more to do, certainly with our community and building support. As I was saying, there's people that are not connected into our community yet, even that basic level. We need to make sure that we're serving everybody in the community, supporting everybody that's impacted by SMA. We have more research to do, early research, new targets, those new approaches to tackling SMA that are going to work in combination with the treatments that we have now. And ultimately, figuring out the care that needs to go alongside treatments, how to deliver that in the best way with evidence. So more work to do in each of these sections as we go forward. But ultimately, again, what we're really aiming for here is improvements in all these areas that will allow improvements, participation, independence in daily life. That's the key area that we're looking for all individuals in our community, to have those improvements as you get to the results that we're seeing in these middle stages. So we're seeing obviously improvements already from treatments and care. And so it's an area that we're doing work on with advocacy and support to support these areas of daily living, what we can do to help independence and participation, simple things, packages, equipment, items like that we can help out with. And then advocacy, and I think this is an interesting area where we've done a lot of advocacy work with the government, legislators for treatment trials, the FDA, payers. We also need to focus our advocacy efforts on these issues around employment, financial security, disability rights. And we're actually really well set up as a community. We're great at doing advocacy. We've done it in these other areas. We now need to turn those advocacy skills to these other areas as we move forward, as we have this success. And it's also about advocating for individuals themselves. That's going to be an important part. That's an important part of independence and participation, not just advocacy always for community legislative issues, advocacy for self as well, self needs. Is there anything you want to say here, Nick?
Yeah, so I love this slide, right? Like this tells us everything, in my opinion, tells us everything that we need to know about where we've been and where we are now and where we're going. And frankly, if we do all of this great work that we've done, but we're unable to make meaningful changes, meaningful difference in the daily lives of our community, it's kind of all for naught, right? So we're not confused about what the goal and the result of our work is. And I love the way this slide sort of sets up how each step along the way leads us to that. And frankly, every sort of incremental improvement that we can make in each of these steps, from research to treatments to care, then incrementally improves that back end and that daily living. So to me, if there's one thing that sort of summarizes what we're doing, it's this. So I love this slide.
And the next slide touches on this same issue as well, that we've been preparing for this. We thought this was how things were going to go as we moved from getting treatments approved, that we need to focus not just on the national issues, getting a treatment approved with the FDA, getting the federal RUS panel to approve newborn screening. We needed to start to focus down into local areas. And as it goes down that pathway that you saw on the other slide that Nick just talked about, you go from research to treatments to care to daily living. The issues of daily living are at a local level. And this is where we need to be. This is where we need to focus. We still have, again, more work to do at the national level, research, treatments, and care. But we're now into this area. We're seeing changes. We need to be doing support advocacy at the local level now for care, but especially this area of daily living. So we have some activities that we're already doing as we focus more on local in addition to national. One angle, hopefully this makes sense for everybody, but one angle to maybe describe that is we still have our national conference, our annual conference, virtual this year, huge and in person next year. But along with that, we are doing mini one-day summits of strength, local one-day conferences around the country. They focus on local specific issues. It can be easier to get involved in a smaller one-day conference like that that's in your local area than just the national conference. So there's items like that we're already focused on, local advocacy issues that are very specific to the local area. But this is the area that's going to need much more focus in the future going forward as well, not just over the next year. This is kind of 5 years, 10 years that we need to focus on this going forward. So if we go to the next slide. And Nick, is there anything else you want to say on that slide?
No, other than just to sort of reiterate, like this notion of how to expand locally is one that the board has focused on for frankly several years now, and will continue to focus on. And we've worked really closely with Kenneth and the staff and others. So I think suffice it to say there'll be more to come on that, but it's a place we believe we need to put some focus into.
So we wanted to move to this section, just as we're winding down this section, this webinar here, on taking a moment to step back. We've gone over in this presentation where we currently stand, the great progress that we've made, the exciting goals. There's big goals here, but hopefully they're exciting. We're optimistic about where we're going to go next. But there's also a recognition here that with the same things that you're hearing, we're not done. SMA is not cured. We still have losses in the community. And so we want to always recognize that as we are optimistic and positive going forward, that we need to take a moment here, look at what SMA still is, take a moment to reflect on that. But also what we've done here is recognizing that so much loss that is still happening, but has happened in the community over the years, is from families that have enabled us to get to the point where we are now. Individuals and families that were taking steps which weren't going to help themselves over so many years, which have given us the results that we have now as a community. So it's a moment of silence, it's a moment of recognition and thanks as well for what everybody has done leading up to this point, with so much pain of what SMA was, still is, but it's those efforts on working as a community for the greater good, that we want to take this moment to recognize and have a moment of silence. And hopefully everybody, if you could join us just in this moment and reflect on what's happened in SMA and what's got us to the point that we are right now. Thank you, everybody. So we'll just go on to the next slide. And we're just going to wrap things up here. One item that we wanted to highlight is to say to please join us this coming Friday, June 11th. This is Central Time at 6:30 p.m. where we're going to have a social wrap-up session. It's still virtual, but we're going to try as best as possible to bring all of us together for this wrap-up item, trying to get the researchers, the clinicians who are also meeting in a virtual conference to all join us as one community. So please join us. We'll try and have some fun in that, wearing conference t-shirts as well, and we'll try and have some social media activities that are going around that at the same time. And then finally, the last slide that we have here is saying a thank you to all of you for joining us at this virtual conference. I wanted to say thank you for the whole community of what people have been able to do, support each other over the pandemic, the last year and a half. As a community, it has been tough. Being isolated for such a long period of time, which in the SMA community has been even longer than for a lot of people out there that were dealing with the pandemic. But it seemed like we were able to come together as a community very well, supporting each other, staying safe, great information that we were able to share. And also the progress in SMA, I think it really stands out that such a huge thing as this pandemic going on, and SMA didn't slow down at all. The progress that we made has just been amazing over this year and a half. We need to catch up. We're excited to catch up. It's one of those amazing things that I think, again, the strength of this community allowed that progress to continue. So thank you for joining us here, this virtual conference. We're excited as we now get to the end of the pandemic and start getting back as a community, and just that positive strength that we all get from what is the SMA community. So thank you. Nick, do you want to say a few final words?
Yeah, so first I too would like to thank our sponsors, without whom we could not do any of this. Special thanks to them. And as Kenneth said, thanks to you all for really riding through some tough times. And you know, at least for me, this isn't nearly as much fun as meeting in person. But look, there's a lot of good content planned here for this conference. It's still going to be a great conference. And you know, the fact that we continue to keep this community engaged and passionate and positive enough to continue to come back and still network with one another and be engaged and interested in things like this, even virtually. I'm not surprised, because I've seen it out of this community now for the better part of a decade, but still always a little bit touched and amazed by it. So thank you guys for your continued energy and passion, and look forward to not only an in-person conference next year, but you know, some in-person events here coming in the back half of the year. So hopefully we can start seeing one another again. So thank you all. Let's have a great conference.
Thank you, Nick, and I think it's over to Sarah.
Thanks, Kenneth. Thank you so much, Kenneth and Nick, for opening up the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference today. We appreciate everyone who joined in, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback by completing the survey that's linked in this agenda session, and you'll also be receiving a follow-up email with the survey link as well. Once again, we are incredibly thankful for the support from our sponsors for making the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference possible. There are so many features and ways to connect on this platform. Be sure to add items to your agenda throughout the week, visit the virtual exhibit booths, participate in the evening events, and make sure to attend Friday's closing wearing your Virtual SMA Conference t-shirt or other Cure SMA gear. If there's anything that we can do for you, or if you have any additional questions, please email us at familysupport@curesma.org. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you again for joining us for the 2021 Virtual SMA Conference. We look forward to seeing you all this week.